Deceleration is but a contraction of time, and acceleration its expansion. All dimensions are relative, and the ratios of all dimensions are universal. If time is the interval between events, and events are effects of motion, time must therefore be as relative as the standard units of the events it records. Time on this planet is merely a relative dimension which measures intervals in the sequential expression of motion which belong to this planet. Time must expand and contract in the universal ratios common to all dimensions of motion when applied to planets in other potential positions. Minutes must shorten as expanding mass rotates faster, and lengthen with contracting mass. Years must balance by lengthening as expanding mass revolves more slowly, and shorten as revolution increases. A year is one periodic revolution of a mass around its sun. A day is one periodic rotation. All planets vary in both of these periods in opposite directions of the universal ratios, and this variation of time is characteristic of all opposites of dimensions in all mass. The opposites of all effects of motion vary in the opposites of their several dimensions in the direct and in the inverse of the universal ratios. If these premises are right, then time dimension must be taken into account in the writing of the law of gravitation and radiation. If variation of time dimension of a mass changes the ability of the mass to appear to attract or repel, then the law which takes into consideration but two of the dimensions of the mass, ignoring all others, cannot be complete. Time and power appear by lengthening the day and shortening the year, and disappear by reversing these effects. Next chapter is called Expressions of Gravitation and Radiation. Temperature, the eighth dimension. This universe of more or less is a universe of varying pressures. Temperature is a dimension of relative and opposing pressures as expressed in its opposites heat and cold. The popular concept that temperature measures only the degree of heat is not in conformity with the laws of motion. Heat is improperly presumed to be an effect of motion, which is operative in both directions. In other words, that which we call cold is assumed to be less heat. This idea must be eliminated from man's thinking. Heat and cold are as much the opposites of temperature dimension as positive and negative electricity. Contraction pressure and expansion pressure are opposites of other dimensions. Every dimension must have its opposite expressions, which persist in their opposition. Each of these are not relatively less or more of the other. Deceleration is not less acceleration. It is the result of the expression of one force, just as acceleration is the result of the expression of its opposite. Neither is negative electricity less positive electricity. Neither is the blue end of the spectrum less of the red end of the spectrum. It is as inaccurate to describe cold as less heat as to describe blue as less red, or to describe negative discharge as less positive charge. Cold, expansion pressure, radiation, the blue half of the spectrum, and the negative electricity are the evidences of the domination of one of the two opposing forces, every expression of which is in an opposite direction from that in which heat, contraction pressure, generation, the red half of the spectrum, and positive electricity are expressed. The greater the contradiction of charging bodies, the more heat a body will register from generation, and conversely, the greater the expansion of discharging bodies, the more cold a body will register from radiation. Like the pressure gauge on the boiler, which indicates the pressure developed within, or the voltmeter on the dynamo, which indicates the resistance to induction developed by the charging of the generator, or the ammeter, which registers the discharge conducted from that accumulated voltage. Heat measures the resistance which magnetism sets up against integration by compression into smaller volume, and cold measures its disintegration by expansion into larger volume. Contraction of volume by integration of the same mass into lesser space is resisted by expansion pressure. Resistance to contraction heats by the opposition of the opposing forces. Heating bodies approach each other and recede from cooling bodies. If this law of motion is well founded, then heating bodies and the attraction of gravitation must be related. Expansion of volume by disintegration into greater space is assisted by the expulsive force of contraction pressure. Expanding bodies recede from expanding and from contracting bodies. If this law of motion is well founded, then cooling bodies, expanding bodies, and the repulsion of radiation must be related. Expanding bodies cool. Expansion of volume repels. Cooling bodies recede from cooling and from heating bodies. Expanding bodies seek lower pressure equilibriums. Cooling bodies contract. Contracting bodies attract. Contracting bodies seek higher pressure equilibriums. To the process of contraction is due the illusion of attraction. Contraction of volume is nature's process of integration. Approaching bodies mutually heat. Heating bodies charge. Charging bodies raise potential. If this law is well founded, then heat, charging bodies, and the attraction of gravitation must be related. Also, positive charge must attract positive charge. Heating bodies radiate. Radiating bodies repel all other bodies. Receding bodies mutually cool. Radiation cools the radiating body and the emanated body. Cooling bodies discharge. Discharging bodies lower potential. If this law is well founded, then cold, discharging bodies and the repulsion of radiation must be related. Also, negative discharge must repel both negative discharge and positive charge. Discharging bodies contract and contracting bodies heat. The reheating of degenerating bodies by contraction is nature's process of regeneration. Heat is ejected from heating bodies. Radiation lowers pressure and potential of radiating and ejecting bodies. Radiating and radiated bodies seek equilibrium positions in lower pressure zones appropriate to their lowered potentials. Radiation of heat is nature's process of solidifying integrated substances of cooling bodies into locked potential positions. Radiation expands, and the consequential regeneration freezes the emanations expelled from radiating bodies. It also cools the radiating body, thus regenerating it also. Expansion disintegrates the emanating body. Disintegration is nature's process of redistribution. Disintegration freezes radiating and radiated bodies. Cooling is nature's process of effecting rigidity in radiating bodies and beginning the repetition of the same process in emanated bodies. Radiation is discharge. Discharging and discharged bodies cool.